There are three distinct junctures in an empath's lifetime, so psychologically perilous, so profoundly destabilizing, that Carl Jung spent years of his career attempting to understand how the human psyche survives them. And what makes these turning points truly dangerous is their subtlety. They don't announce themselves with turmoil or collapse. They slip in quietly, clothed in the everyday, disguised as normal emotional exchanges, common relational patterns, ordinary life. Yet beneath that calm exterior lies the potential to unravel your entire sense of self. These are moments that can dissolve your inner structure, blur your psychological boundaries, and trap you in decades-long cycles of self-abandonment. Jung referred to them as critical thresholds of psychic dissolution. He believed that without a deliberate survival framework, highly empathic individuals faced only two possible outcomes. They would either lose themselves entirely or shut down their capacity for empathy just to endure. Today, we'll uncover these three psychological flashpoints, understanding what makes them so insidiously destructive, why they emerge in empathic lives, and most importantly, how to apply Jung's survival method for navigating them without losing your center in the process. Have you ever felt one of these invisible turning points in your own life? That quiet inner shift that changes everything? Share your experience in the comments below. Your reflection might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you find meaning in this kind of exploration, remember to subscribe, not just to the channel, but to the journey of your own awakening. Carl Gustav Jung recognized something that escaped nearly all psychologists of his time: that certain personality types are not merely vulnerable to mental illness, but to existential collapse. These individuals face dangers that have nothing to do with pathology and everything to do with structure, how their consciousness relates to others and to the collective psyche. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung began as Freud's collaborator before breaking away to develop an entirely new map of the human mind. His theories of psychological types, the collective unconscious, and the individuation process revolutionized how we understand inner life. But it was his direct work with what he called feeling types and introverted intuitives, those with deep emotional and intuitive sensitivity, that led him to identify three recurring psychological crises. In Psychological Types, 1921, and later in The Development of Personality, 1934, Jung documented case after case of profoundly empathic individuals reaching what he termed psychic breaking points. These weren't patients with diagnosable disorders. They were stable, intelligent, and compassionate human beings whose inner equilibrium had reached collapse. He called these thresholds moments of unbearable knowing. At the Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital and later in his private clinic, Jung noticed a striking pattern. Empathic individuals often arrived at his door at very specific crossroads in their lives. They couldn't articulate what was wrong, only that something essential inside them had shifted. They described feeling emptied, estranged from themselves, as though trapped in invisible quicksand, where every attempt at self-help only deepened the sinking. Over decades of observation, Jung identified three pivotal experiences that surfaced again and again in these lives. He called them moments of psychic emergency. How a person responded to these moments, he believed, determined whether they achieved individuation, psychological wholeness, or remained locked in what he called unconscious identification with others. Before we examine these moments, it's essential to understand what Jung meant by empathy, because his definition differs profoundly from how we use the word today. In his writings on the dynamic between the ego and the unconscious, Jung describes certain individuals as possessing psychic permeability. These are people whose psychological boundaries are unusually thin. They live in constant subtle contact between their own unconscious and that of others. They intuit what most cannot perceive. They feel the emotional undercurrents of a room before a word is spoken. They sense deception not by reasoning, but by visceral resonance. They absorb others' emotions almost osmotically, like human tuning forks vibrating to every surrounding tone. Jung did not idealize this trait. Far from it. He regarded such sensitivity as both a gift and a profound liability, a kind of spiritual nakedness requiring sophisticated psychic defenses merely to stay sane. The first of the 3 deadly moments, he observed, comes when this empathic openness encounters its first irreversible disillusionment. He called it the recognition of non-reciprocity. The first deadly moment, the recognition of non-reciprocity. This first psychic danger begins when you realize with soul-deep clarity that the boundless empathy you extend to others is not being mirrored back to you. Not because people are cruel or malevolent, but because most simply do not possess the same capacity or willingness to meet you at that depth. This is not about noticing that someone isn't as caring as you are. That's ordinary disappointment. The true deadly moment comes when the illusion collapses, when you finally see that your entire model of relationship has been built on an unspoken falsehood, that empathy naturally begets empathy. You believed that if you explained yourself enough, cared enough, understood enough, others would reciprocate. But in this first deadly moment, that belief shatters. You realize with almost surgical precision that this reciprocal world you've imagined does not exist. Jung chronicled this event repeatedly, particularly in Modern Man in Search of a Soul. One patient described her own revelation that destroyed everything. She had spent years nurturing a friendship with deep emotional generosity, listening, comforting, offering presence. Then, during a personal crisis, she reached out to this friend expecting the same kind of care she had always given. What came back was perfunctory politeness, awkward avoidance, and a swift change of topic. Jung wrote that what devastated the woman wasn't the shallow response itself, but the recognition it triggered. This had always been the dynamic. She had always been the giver, the emotional anchor, the silent container. She had been so immersed in giving that she had never noticed the total absence of return. This recognition, Jung warned, can feel like the floor of reality dropping away. You are suddenly confronted by a frightening truth. You may not be as emotionally accompanied as you thought. You may be surrounded by relationships that are structurally one-sided, connections in which you play the listener, healer, or comforter, while others simply receive. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Jung called this the removal of projections. For years, you had projected your own empathic depth onto others, assuming they experienced the same level of emotional reciprocity. When those projections fall away, what's left is raw clarity, often indistinguishable from despair. What makes this moment genuinely dangerous, Jung cautioned, is the conclusions the empath tends to draw from it. Most swing between 2 destructive poles, self-blame or cynicism. Either I must not be worthy of real care, or no one is capable of true empathy. Both are distortions. Both, Jung said, are symptoms of psychic inflation followed by deflation. The psyche over-identifying with its empathic ideal, then collapsing into hopelessness when that ideal fails. Neither represents truth, and both can calcify into lifelong patterns of bitterness or self-erasure. To survive this first deadly moment, Jung prescribed a practice he called conscious discrimination. The individuated person, he wrote, must learn to discern who is capable of reciprocal relationship and who is not. This is not judgment, it is discernment. He used a gardener's metaphor. A wise gardener does not plant orchids in desert soil, not because the desert is bad, but because it cannot nourish orchids. Likewise, not every person can sustain empathic reciprocity. The task is not to condemn or withdraw from humanity, but to invest your deepest energy only where mutuality is possible. In daily life, this means that when someone consistently fails to meet you at the depth you offer, you don't push harder or analyze endlessly. You accept the data. You recalibrate. You remain kind, but you no longer pour your vital empathy into a vessel that cannot hold it. Jung believed this act of conscious discrimination was the first true act of self-protection for the empath. Without it, one wastes their psychic vitality trying to evoke reciprocity where the capacity simply doesn't exist, and misses the real relationships where it does. He wrote, "The greatest burden consciousness can bear is the unconscious demand that all relationships be equal in depth and reciprocity. Nature does not work that way. Relationships vary in depth, and wisdom is knowing the difference. If the first deadly moment arrives like a lightning strike, sudden, shocking, irreversible, the second creeps in like fog. You rarely notice it happening until it has quietly consumed you. Jung referred to this as the dissolution of self through perpetual accommodation. This is the moment when you recognize that you've been bending, adapting, and morphing for so long to meet the needs and expectations of others, that you've lost the outline of who you actually are. Your preferences, desires, instincts, and authentic emotional responses have been buried under layers of subtle adaptation. And then one day, someone asks a simple question: "What do you want?" And you find yourself utterly blank, unable to answer, horrified to realize that you genuinely don't know. Jung encountered this phenomenon constantly in his analytic work, particularly among highly empathic clients, and most frequently, though not exclusively, among women. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he explored what he called the persona trap. The persona, in Jung's model, is the mask we wear to navigate society, the role we play in order to function in the social world. It is necessary. Without some kind of persona, we couldn't interact with others, hold jobs, or form relationships. But for the empath, this mask becomes dangerously adaptive. Empathic individuals, Jung observed, often develop not one persona, but many. They grow so attuned to the subtle needs and moods of others that they learn to shapeshift effortlessly. Around one person, they are cheerful, around another calm, around another endlessly patient or understanding. Over time, these various masks become so convincing that the empath forgets there was ever a face beneath them. The colleague sees one version of you, the composed, reliable listener. The family sees another, the dutiful, understanding caretaker. Your friends see yet another, the endlessly available emotional refuge. Each role carefully tuned to the expectations of its audience. And the longer you play these parts, the fainter your own authentic signal becomes until you can no longer locate it. Jung described this state as ego dissolution through over-identification with the persona. The mask has devoured the face. You have become your adaptation. There is no longer an I behind the roles, only performance. One of Jung's patients described the sensation perfectly. "I appear solid and real," she said. "But if you reach to touch me, your hand passes right through. There's nothing actually there." This haunting image, Jung wrote, was the clearest representation of what he called advanced persona identification. A life lived entirely as projection, with no anchor in authentic selfhood. But what makes this moment not just painful, but psychically dangerous, is what happens next. When you finally recognize how much of yourself has been traded for acceptance, your first instinct is often rebellion. You swing hard in the opposite direction. You stop accommodating. You declare boundaries. You try to reclaim a self that's been neglected for too long. But, as Jung warned, this reactive swing can be just as unconscious as the accommodation that preceded it. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he described the law of enantiodromia, the tendency of all things, when pushed to an extreme, to flip into their opposite. When you've spent years over-adapting, the psyche's first attempt at healing often manifests as rigidity, defiance, or even hostility. You stop saying yes to everything, but you may start saying no to everything. You exchange the mask of compliance for the mask of rebellion. Different expression, same unconsciousness. This isn't true individuation. It's simply the shadow form of accommodation. The pendulum has swung, but it hasn't stabilized. The empath is still defined by others, still reacting to the external world rather than responding from inner authenticity. To survive this second deadly moment, Jung proposed one of his most profound and practical methods: active imagination in service of self-recovery. He taught that the way to rediscover the authentic self was not through rebellion or withdrawal, but through genuine dialogue with one's own psyche. Active imagination is not mere daydreaming. It's a conscious engagement with the inner world. a structured conversation with the parts of yourself that have been silenced. In therapy, Jung would have his patients close their eyes, pose a question to their own unconscious, and wait, without forcing, for an image, a word, or a feeling to arise. It might start with something as simple as, "What do I truly enjoy?" Or, "What am I afraid to lose if I stop accommodating?" At first, the mind floods with noise, the trained adaptive voices saying, "You should like this. That would disappoint someone. It's selfish to want that." Jung called these the chorus of the persona, and he instructed patients to set those voices aside gently but firmly, and to wait for something deeper. He compared this to learning to hear a whisper in a room full of shouting. It takes patience. The authentic voice doesn't force itself. It waits to be invited back. As it reemerges, this authentic self will likely surprise you. It may contradict everything you've believed about yourself. It may tell you that you no longer enjoy what you've built your life around. It may reveal that your preferences, values, even your relationships have been founded on pleasing others. And here is where the second deadly moment reveals its fangs, because reclaiming authenticity always demands disappointment. You will disappoint people who have benefited from your constant yes. You will confuse people who are accustomed to your predictability. You will lose certain dynamics, perhaps certain relationships entirely. Jung insisted this was not cruelty, but necessity. He called it the willingness to disappoint as a developmental milestone. You cannot recover your soul without letting go of those who only knew your mask. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung described undergoing this same process himself after his break with Freud. For years, he had subtly adapted his ideas to preserve their relationship, aligning his theories with Freud's to maintain belonging. When the rupture finally came, he found himself unmoored, unsure what he truly believed apart from what had pleased his mentor. It took him years of solitude, self-dialogue, and what he called living the questions before his own voice emerged again. That lonely inner excavation produced his most important work. For Jung, this process was not just professional recovery, it was psychological rebirth. He discovered that the self, once buried beneath accommodation, could be resurrected through curiosity, honesty, and patience. In modern terms, imagine this protocol at work in something as ordinary as a social invitation. You're invited to a gathering. The old you, the accommodating self, automatically says yes, then later manages your dread with polite performance and forced enthusiasm. The new you pauses. You ask, "Do I truly want to go?" Not "should I?" Not "what will people think if I decline?" but "do I actually want to be there?" Then you wait for the honest response. It may be yes, it may be no, or it may be something nuanced. "I'd like to go, but only for an hour." Whenever the answer, you honor it. You act accordingly. You practice disappointing when necessary. You practice confusing people who expect the old you. You learn to tolerate the anxiety of authenticity. Jung taught that this discomfort is not evidence of doing something wrong. It's evidence of rebirth. To reclaim the authentic self is to re-enter the world naked, uncertain, unpracticed in truth. It's awkward. It's vulnerable. The purpose of this second deadly moment, Jung believed, is to initiate the empath into true selfhood, the kind of selfhood that can sustain empathy without dissolving into it. You are learning that compassion without boundaries is not love, it is self-erasure. You are learning that understanding others begins with understanding yourself. When Jung applied this to his patients, he noticed that those who endured this process without fleeing, who stayed with the disorientation long enough for the real self to emerge, developed an entirely new quality of empathy. Their caring became selective, rooted, and sustainable. They no longer absorbed everyone's suffering indiscriminately. They could be present without merging, compassionate without losing integrity. In this way, the second deadly moment, though agonizing, acts as the alchemical fire that tempers empathy into something durable. It burns away the false selves and reveals what Jung called the center that holds. The third and final deadly moment Jung identified is the most profound and the most devastating. It is not loud or violent. It doesn't feel like despair at first. It feels like silence. It feels like looking around and realizing that no matter how close another person stands beside you, an invisible gulf remains between your inner world and theirs. Jung called this the recognition of fundamental aloneness. It is distinct from the loneliness of non-reciprocity we explored earlier. This is not about discovering that others cannot match your depth of care. It is about seeing, for the first time, that even those who love you deeply, sincerely, cannot ever fully know you. There exists a permanent and unbridgeable separation between consciousnesses. You can reach across it, you can meet in flashes of understanding, but you can never erase it. For the empath, whose life has revolved around the fantasy of complete understanding, this realization lands like a spiritual extinction. You have spent your life translating others, feeling them, reading them, absorbing them. You have believed, perhaps without knowing it, that if you could simply love well enough or speak clearly enough, someone would one day see you in the same total way. And now you realize they cannot. They will never see the full contents of your inner world. Not because they are unwilling, not because they are incapable of care, but because consciousness itself does not permit that level of merging. The bridge you've been crossing your whole life is a mirage. Jung wrote about this awakening most explicitly in The Undiscovered Self, 1957. The individual, he said, is both a single being and a social being. As a separate being, he is absolutely alone, and the more conscious he becomes, the more this aloneness reveals itself. He wasn't being nihilistic. He was naming a truth that the spiritually mature must eventually face. Consciousness is solitary by design. Our experience of reality is forever filtered through our own psyche. We can empathize, imagine, and approximate another's experience, but we can never enter it. To most people, this is an abstract idea, a philosophical curiosity. But for empaths, it is a cataclysm, because your entire psychic identity has been built on the capacity to enter others' experience, to feel their world as your own. The realization that no one can do this for you, not fully, not ever, can feel like annihilation. Jung described patients who, upon reaching this insight, entered a period of what he called existential despair. They felt as though they lived inside a transparent box, able to see others clearly, yet forever unable to be touched by them. Others said it felt like speaking a language no one else could ever understand, no matter how patiently they translated. Jung took this despair seriously because he had known it himself. After his break with Freud, he spent years in near-total isolation, wrestling with his own mind. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he describes nights when he felt cut off from all men, a stranger to the world, aware of the impossibility of being fully understood. But out of that solitude, Jung discovered something essential. He realized that the danger of this third moment lies not in the aloneness itself, but in what the mind does with it. Faced with the impossibility of total understanding, many empaths fall into what Jung called psychic withdrawal. They close down, they stop reaching. If no one can ever fully see me, they think, then why should I try to connect at all? The heart armors itself. The sensitivity that once illuminated life becomes muted. The empath becomes a ghost within their own existence, functioning, polite, but internally exiled. Jung called this state premature individuation, a retreat into selfhood that masquerades as maturity but is actually fear. The person claims to be self-contained, when in truth, they have simply stopped trying to connect. For Jung, real individuation required a far harder task: to embrace the paradox. In his monumental Mysterium Conjunctionis, he wrote that psychological maturity depends on one's ability to hold contradictions without forcing them into resolution. Here, the paradox is this: you are fundamentally alone in your consciousness, and genuine connection remains real and meaningful. Both truths coexist. Neither cancels the other. The survival protocol for this third deadly moment, then, is not to resolve the paradox, but to live within it. You must stop demanding that love erase your isolation and instead allow love to exist within it. It is the shift from yearning for total understanding to cherishing partial understanding, from expecting perfect communion to appreciating imperfect but sincere connection. Jung used a simple metaphor. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of a river. They will never occupy the same bank, yet they can wave to each other, call out, send gifts floating across on little boats. The river remains, but so does the relationship. The distance doesn't nullify the bond. It defines its beauty. In practical terms, this survival protocol means that when you share something intimate and the person across from you doesn't fully understand, you resist the old reflex to over-explain, to force them to bridge the gap. You pause and say, perhaps quietly, "You might not completely get this, and that's okay. I appreciate that you're trying." That simple sentence, Jung believed, holds tremendous power. It releases both of you. It ends the impossible expectation of psychic merger and replaces it with compassion for the limits of human communication. The other half of this protocol is what Jung called self-companionship. If no one can inhabit your consciousness completely, then you must learn to be good company for yourself. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, he described developing what he termed the inner dialogue. This is not self-criticism or analysis. It is friendship with your own psyche. You learn to listen to yourself with interest. You become curious about your own moods, gentle with your own confusion, patient with your own pain. You stop demanding that others provide the total understanding you've never given yourself. Instead, you offer it inwardly. Jung was clear that this isn't narcissism, it's necessity. Whoever looks outside dreams, he wrote. Whoever looks inside awakens. When you become your own witness, when you learn to be present with your own complexity, you stop being enslaved by the longing to be understood completely. You no longer need every relationship to be a mirror. Connection becomes a choice, not a dependency. And that, Jung believed, is what transforms the empath's curse into wisdom. Because once you faced the terror of fundamental aloneness and survived it, you return to the world different, quieter, steadier, freer. You no longer connect from need, but from fullness. You no longer seek rescuers, you seek companions. You no longer crave perfect empathy, you appreciate imperfect humanity. Tempered empathy, the outcome of survival. Jung observed that those who successfully traverse all three deadly moments emerge with what he called tempered empathy. This is empathy refined through fire, an empathy that retains its warmth but has gained discernment. It is empathy that can stand in the presence of suffering without drowning in it, that knows when to reach out and when to step back. Tempered empathy, Jung said, has three defining qualities. Selectivity. You no longer extend your deepest energy to everyone indiscriminately. You recognize, as the first survival protocol teaches, that not every soil can sustain your roots. Boundaries. You can care for others without dissolving into them. The second protocol, the recovery of authentic selfhood, keeps you anchored. Realism. You accept the paradox of human connection. Partial understanding is still worth cherishing, and solitude is not exile but structure. In Jung's later writings, he called those who develop tempered empathy wounded healers. They are people who have been broken open by the very sensitivity that once endangered them, and who have turned that wound into wisdom. A wounded healer helps others not through naive idealism, but through lived understanding. They know the terrain of despair. They have walked through psychic fire and come back bearing light. In The Psychology of the Transference, Jung wrote that the wounded healer does not cure by saving others, but by illuminating the path through their own survival. Their empathy is no longer sentimental, it is sacred. He once wrote in a letter to a patient overwhelmed by her own empathic suffering, "You cannot save anyone. You can only light the path with your own example. And to light the path, you must first survive the darkness yourself." That, in the end, is the essence of these 3 initiations. They are not punishments. They are rites of passage. The recognition of non-reciprocity teaches discernment. The dissolution of self through accommodation teaches authenticity. The recognition of fundamental aloneness teaches self-companionship. Each one feels like death as it unfolds. Each one dismantles a cherished illusion. But if you endure them consciously, they do not destroy you, they complete you. Jung warned that when these thresholds are crossed unconsciously, the outcome can be catastrophic. He called it psychic death, a state where a person goes on living externally while inwardly disconnected from meaning, authenticity, and empathy. But when faced consciously, these moments are initiations into wholeness. They burn away what is false. They strip you of illusions about love, identity, and connection. And what remains is something infinitely rarer: empathy with edges, compassion that includes the self, love that understands the limits of understanding and cherishes the miracle anyway. So if you find yourself inside one of these moments, seeing your relationships with new painful clarity, realizing you've lost yourself through endless accommodation, or feeling the chill of existential solitude, remember this: you are not dying, you are being remade. If this message resonated with you, if you recognized yourself somewhere in these words, let this be your reminder. You're not alone in this work. Leave a comment sharing where you are on your own path of awakening, and let this community witness you. And if you'd like to keep walking this path together, reflections on empathy, consciousness, and the inner life, subscribe and stay connected. Each week, we explore the deep places of the human spirit and how to return to the world whole. This is not the end of your empathy, it is its transformation. And when you emerge scarred, quieter but luminous, you will understand what Jung meant when he wrote, "Only those who have faced the night know the full measure of the dawn."